What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel, Clemente Collector. And today I have a great friend on, another Clemente collector himself. And he's been doing it longer than me. He's got some really, really great Clemente cards. And I met him at the National this year. And I got to videotape him getting his Grill Clemente 3D card. So that's a card that I don't know, when I will ever get in my lifetime, but just living through him, it was just such a wonderful experience. It bonded a bunch of us guys that were there. And without further ado, we're going to talk about grading today. We're actually two Clemente guys. I want to talk to him about grading because he's got some great opinions and some different opinions from some people I normally talk to. So we're actually going to talk about that today. But let me bring him in right now. What's up, Jason?
Hey Theo, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I should have probably started before before people stop listening to me. I probably should have started with the title of that we're talking about grading, but I'm so excited to get you on here. So
Well, thanks. It's great to be here, and I reiterate that was a really fun experience to share. Getting that 3D Clemente with some Clemente fans and other collectors, so that was a lot of fun for me, and I appreciate you videotaping that, so I had it because I sure wasn't going to stop and record it myself. It was I was so nervous during the whole transaction, I wouldn't have been able to do that.
I'm sure. I will put a link below on this conversation if you want to watch it after this. If you haven't seen it, but yeah, it was really really cool. A Mantle card was involved. A Babe Ruth card was involved, so it's definitely worth watching. But Jason, I've seen you on Carlos's channel a little bit, but you're not on all the channels that I like to watch. So do you do collaborations on anybody else's channel, or is it pretty much Carlos?
I mean, I'm open to collaboration. I'm a small channel. I like to view myself as kind of punk rock channel. I don't do a lot of collaborations, but I'm open to anything.
Yeah,
Um, my thing is, as a collector, it who doesn't have, let's say, I don't know, like the biggest reach. It's hard to get on other people's channels. But I'm very friendly with a lot of creators that or people on YouTube. It's just I only have 200 or 300 views per video, so it's just a lot of people like won't put me on. But I've been on Dustin. I've been on Dustin's channel, Sports
nice.
Card Dad. So I've been on a few channels. It's just
Well,
like I said, being a collector and not really having like a lot of let's say sponsorships or things like that. It's just my channel is really just about collecting cards. So but I do enjoy just talking about cards, and I really appreciate you bringing me on and getting a
yeah,
chance to share some of my experience with grading because I've been there since it started. Let's say that.
nice. And you know what? It wasn't. Yeah, and by no means was it a dig. I want to get channels thinking about having you on because I think you have great opinions on stuff and different opinions on stuff, and hopefully we can get you on something on for collectors here too. That would be awesome. But yeah, let's get into it. The big news this week. If you're watching this today, it probably happened last week. But PSA released a new slab. I think the main points of it is better UV protection,
Mhm.
water resistant, even if you submerge it in water, maybe medical grade plastic, which makes it 20% heavier. Did I cover everything, or did I,
Yeah,
did I
I
say
mean
something
they
else?
did a big interesting. I view some of the things like marketing spin, like medical grade plastic is, I mean, it's really you're not going to do surgery with it. You're not going to insert it into someone's body. So I'm not sure that's really relevant. But I get the idea of making it, because they talked a lot about you can feel it's better quality. They really get into that heaviness and it feels higher quality. I always say, like when I work with with marketers, I work in R&D. I'm a scientist. I work with a lot of marketers that try to like take what I make and figure out how to sell it. And so they
Yeah.
use a lot of terminology that doesn't, we call it puffery. Like it doesn't really mean anything, but it makes people think it means something. And I view a lot of that press release by PSA to be a puffery. They're saying a lot of words, but the thing that made the most difference is that they took away some of the clarity issues because, I just got an order back from PSA, and the cards, just had like almost like a filminess to, like the holders had sort of like a filminess to them that I didn't enjoy. And it just didn't feel like it was crystal clear plastic. Kind of like people are very excited about Tags holder and some of the other holders in the market that are just
Yeah.
new, or even SGC's holder, which doesn't seem to have that clarity issue that PSA was having.
Yeah. So the order you just got in, does it still have the former holder, or did it have the newest holder?
I just got order in just like last week, and it still had the old holder. So I
Okay.
guess you had to do it after that press release to get it. So I have cards at PSA right now. Hopefully they come back with a new holder.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into just we're going to go through each grading company, and I'd love to hear your opinion on if you were the CEO of these companies, some of the
Mhm.
changes you think they could make to possibly be a better grading service for us. So let's
Sure.
start off since we already talked about PSA. Let's start off with PSA. What are some of the points that you think that they could improve on and do better for us?
Yeah, I mean, with PSA to me, and hopefully this new holder is the right direction, but the customization of their holders has always been very poor. They don't do a great job of making the holder fit certain cards and certain sets. Um, so to me, as a collector, I don't like seeing things like the rubber sleeve. So it feels like that's gone away. So that seems like a big deal. But the other thing that PSA needs to really do is just customer service. I mean, they do not have good customer service even today. I
Yeah.
don't feel like that they, are responsive. If you have questions or issues, they still feel like it's a hard company to get answers with. So I think that is something that we just have to recognize. Sorry for a second. That it's never going. It doesn't feel like PSA is ever going to go back to being a more let's say collector friendly. They feel like a big giant corporation when you
Yeah.
deal with them,
Yeah.
and it doesn't feel like they want to change that anytime soon. So I feel like if you want a different experience with PSA, I'm not sure that's the direction they're going in. It feels like they're getting more and more corporate.
I could see that for sure, and yeah, I know that's why a lot of people love SGC is how quickly they get back to you, and they don't. It doesn't feel like they twist your arm to get like to kind of help fix your issue and things like that. But I would like to talk about my friend Adam, Splendid Sports. He was big into the registry, like you were big in the
Mhm.
registry for a while, and his big thing is he's like, there's some really tough registries out here. The Mickey Mantle registry, the Clemente registry, the Mays registry. It doesn't feel like PSA does enough for the
Mhm.
guys who are number one.
Yeah, I
Like
agree.
like where's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow? Where's the why isn't your picture on the front of the PSA magazine if you're in one of the premier registries? Why do you think that they just like it's just like, oh, we'll give you a sticker? I think that's all you get on the website, like a sticker
Yeah,
that says you won that year. Like
yeah.
doesn't
No,
seem like
you bring up a great point, and one of the reasons I'm not competitive in the registry anymore is a lot to do with that because when it first came out, they took you to dinner, you got like an actual physical award. It was a much more celebrated thing, and again, I go to this corporate structure. Well, it's like, well, people still buy our slabs if we don't do this, if we don't spend money on the hobbyist. And again, that's kind of what I pointed out before is, you're right that this should be a bigger deal. They should be using this to drive people into the registry, but they don't really feel like they need the registry to sell their service.
yeah,
And when PSA first started, the registry drove their business so much, which is why they were so good about treating people in the registry so well at the beginning of PSA's existence. Then, as the registry became less important to the business model, you saw what happened to the registry. It became just kind of like an afterthought. And again, as if I was CEO as a collector of PSA, as PSA CEO, I would add SGC cards to PSA's registry. I
yeah,
think a combined registry would be amazing for collectors because could you imagine? because now that they own both brands, they do own both brands. A combined registry would be a great thing for the hobby, but I know the big fish in the registry still have some pull, and they would rather the registry go away than have people leapfrog them in that registry because they own SGC cards.
Yeah. Yeah,
You
that's
know?
that's the problem. You're making your customers for the longest time mad.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's interesting that you think they should go that route. And I've actually told you I think they should go the opposite route. I think they should help SGC, give SGC all the data they need, all the people they need to get their registry running, to copy pretty much everything that they do on their registry, to just take all that data. And I think they should have two separate registries. And I think you're not making the PSA guys angry that have been there forever. And now you possibly having somebody switch over and do two registries to try to be number one in one of them. I think people would buy more duplicate cards. Not me. I'm just saying I think there's people out there that would try to compete in both. So
Yeah, I think there should be three registries. Honestly, I mean, I think there's room to do SGC, a PSA, and a combined registry. I think the combined registry
yeah, that's interesting.
is a realistic way of people collect,
Yep.
because if you buy the card, not the holder, and
Right.
there's an amazing SGC card that's in a holder, I don't want to get it regraded to PSA just so I can add it to a registry, which is exactly what you used to have to do. So
Hmm.
one of my videos I did a few times is crossing over cards from SGC to PSA. Some of that was to get cards so I could add to registries.
Yeah.
Some of it was to make money. Some of it was to just see if I could get some higher grades, just to see what would happen on that side of it. But some of it was to get cards for registries. And that, for me, it was kind of like if I could just add that card to the registry as is, that would have been preferred, because the cost, the handling, the one thing I don't like about popping cards out of holders is this. Um, the chances of damaging a card is still there. And I have damaged cards getting them out of holders. And the new holders are getting harder and harder to open. And the chances of you making a mistake, damaging the card is there. And I don't think, I want to take my, SGC 753 manual and have to cross it over to PSA so I can have it added to my registry. That
Yeah.
sort of just seems kind of like I don't have, I should have the option to do both. If, especially since they own both brands, because to me, it made no sense when they were separate companies, but they own the same brands. Like,
Yep.
why not have a combined registry? And again, you would have your PSA only registry, your SGC only registry, and the combined registry. It would be very interesting to see sets that contain both, because I think those sets probably would look amazing. Like you probably
Yeah.
see cards, that would be really crazy to see what those registries would look like. But again, I think PSA itself doesn't put a lot of stock into the registry anymore, and I think that's why you haven't seen any movement or any announcement on an SGC registry, because you think that would be pretty easy to do with the technology SGC already own, or PSA already owns. So
Yeah.
maybe it's
Exactly.
coming, but it sure hasn't been something they've been focused on. It feels like.
I like your point. I think you might have talked me into the three prong. I like that idea. I think that's cool. I think you could satisfy multiple people there. So I actually do like that idea. I do want to talk about a little bit though. You talked a little bit about crossover, and actually the first time I watched your channel prior to knowing you was your series where you were trying to, and I love when people are like thinking, like trying to think through stuff and showing the numbers and stuff, and you were cracking SGC slabs to PSA. And I think this was like during the pandemic era, and it was just a guilty pleasure of mine because I don't know what it is, but just a crossover video gets me every time. I don't know. It just it see you were doing really good, like, and I think you actually stopped doing them because PSA started getting a lot more strict, right?
Well, there's a lot of things going on there. In terms of, yeah, like why I stopped, why I started. I did, I think, 70 something cards, all vintage. There was modern in there too, but I didn't want to really talk about modern because all that grades pretty well for the most part. So it's like, a 9 to a 9, a 9 to a 10. That's not really that interesting. Vintage cards crossing over is always a little bit more interesting to see what happens.
Yeah.
My point of view was this: is that there was a big price difference in that 2018 to 2020 period between PSA and SGC. Like in some cases, 4 to 6x for some cards. So there was a huge opportunity for arbitrage between the two grading companies, and to take advantage of some of that. If you could get a grade that was higher, and I showed on my channel that even though I was losing grading points, if I looked at the average grade in the SGC versus PSA, I was losing 1 or 2 points on average, but by just crossing straight or getting a few bumps, it would pay for the entire order, or I'd make money. And that was happening for a while. And then what happened was I got really skunked on a lot of cards. And what I mean skunked was I got cards that were damaged. And I talked about it in 2 videos already, where I showed where the holder itself for SGC was damaging the cards. So the card itself probably was fine when it was put in the holder, but the insert for the SGC card was poorly cut, and it damaged the card. And so one was a 62 Aaron, and when I pulled the card out, it basically had a gouge in the side. And of course, that card went from being a 7.5 to like a 3 or 4, and that made me lose. That was a big loss in that card. And then I started seeing cards coming back ungradable, like miscuts or minimum size, and those cards go from 8s to 0s. I mean, that's a big hit when that happens.
Yeah, I couldn't even imagine. I think you were the first person and granted, I mean, I'm not sitting here saying I'm watching everybody's YouTube channels, but you were the first person who brought up the SGC holder damaging cards I've ever seen, and I've barely seen anybody talk about it since. To be honest with you, as an SGC guy, it really does scare me a lot. Sometimes when I get my order, I just got a bazooka card. It's on the wall now, but the SGC literally cuts these frames custom. Unless it's a standard card, but the bazooka card's not. And obviously I have a bunch of cards that aren't. And I'm looking sometimes and I'm like, dang, is that in there tight? It really makes me concerned, like you said, is if I actually broke that open, if there would be some edge damage on those cards. It's kind of scary. It really is.
Yeah, I'm very for one thing, I know it sometimes feels on my channel I'm a PSA guy all the way, but I really do have quite a big part of my collection in SGC, and especially pre-war, which is really dominated by SGC in terms of availability.
Yeah.
I also pointed out that the SGC T3 holders allow the card to slip under the insert, and I bought in an auction a couple of years ago 4 cards. 3 were in SGC holders, 1 was in PSA of T3s, and I got the order, and I think it was from PWCC auction. And every SGC card, when I pulled it out of the shipping container, they had all slid underneath the holder, the insert. But the PSA, since it didn't have that insert, was fine. I'm like, I made a video about it, but it was just a really, of course I could bang on it and get the card back and where it should be, but that's just, to me, like something that they should just fix. I mean, again, if as a SGC CEO, I would definitely want to make sure that kind of thing doesn't happen. And again, if they're hand making some of those inserts, then they just have to have good quality control to make sure that there's not hanging chads, there's not burrs and just unevenly cut, places where that could damage the card. So I don't think it's, again, I'm always, part of my job is quality assurance. I'm a VP of quality for the company I'm at. One of the things that, I work in quality and R&D is we understand mistakes happen, but you have to correct them and prevent them from happening again. That's part of your job in quality. And I feel like, with most grading companies, is SGC has done a great job on customer service, but they also haven't fixed some of the issues that are still there permanently. And I think PSA now has tried to fix some of those issues permanently. But I know that the one of the reasons that holder for PSA changed so dramatically is also for counterfeit reasons,
Mhm.
fraud. They're
Yeah.
still they're still one of their biggest issues because they have that full guarantee back is fraud. They're very scared that people are popping holders and slipping cards in. That
Yeah.
is one of those things that PSA is tremendously scared about. Because I lived through the when it was a game scandal, and I got a couple cards from that scandal in my collection that I ended up getting, having to return and dealing with that dealer and trying to get my money back. And that was a nightmare. And there's still cards from that whole ordeal in circulation to this day because PSA didn't do a good job of actively pulling those cards and alerting collectors about them. And that's where someone went in and basically created their own PSA slabs. It's a whole there's a whole court case about it. They went to court. But I talked about it in one of my early videos, but that's what scares PSA the most, in my opinion, is counterfeits. Like a counterfeit slab would just destroy their credibility, and they're doing everything to prevent their slab from being counterfeited as well. So, I think that is something that they have a huge, let's say, a deep scar as a company on counterfeits, and I think they just talked about it recently that it's still happening, that we're still getting some counterfeit PSA slabs hitting the market, and I just feel like all the changes to PSA slabs are going to be basically around that protection and also just so they can't be counterfeited so easily.
Yeah, that's interesting because I don't know. I don't know why SGC hasn't been counterfeited as often.
Mhm.
Obviously, it's not as popular as a company as PSA is, but unlike PSA, I believe they have something in their label that they've done for a little while now
Mhm.
that helps them with counterfeit protection. And I don't think I'm pretty sure SGC now that they're merged is getting some info from PSA to maybe
Mhm.
do something similar. But do you have any idea why SGC hasn't been counterfeited as often as PSA or cracked and a card put in and
Yeah.
glued back in? Like, do you?
I mean, I think there's two answers to that question. One is it could have happened and maybe no one really noticed. I think sometimes people just don't realize that cards are in circulation for a long time before something like that's found. So the odds that it has never happened is probably pretty low. But
Right,
to your point, I think if you're going to get caught doing something, there's a chance of being caught. You're going to probably try to do something at the highest end possible
right.
to make it worth your time and money. Yeah, because I also say this too is that most scammers and people who do this nefarious stuff aren't the smartest because they get greedy and they try to like do things that get them caught. Um, there's very few scammers who go out and try to just like in counterfeit money, no one makes a $1 bill, because that's like not worth their time.
Yeah,
But like in like so is SGC kind of like, well, it's not worth my time to counterfeit an SGC card. I think with the prices now being a lot more closely together, I think I would be a lot more worried about it. If I was SGC, I would definitely be wanting to see what we can do to prevent that because with that 52 Mantle selling for so much money in it and that getting SGC a lot of publicity, I think it's going to be one of those things where yeah, if I was trying to be low risk, counterfeit some SGC slabs, if it was much easier to do, that would be something I would be worried about. I mean,
yeah.
so hopefully PSA can help with that. I mean, that's the reason why you'd hope a company would merge together is to utilize resources to prevent issues across both platforms, both brands.
100%, 100%. And I'm hoping PSA is going to lean on SGC for vintage grading. It seems like they might not have enough graders for the turnaround time for
Mhm.
vintage compared to modern right now.
Oh, you nailed that really big because anyone who sends cards in, because I do a lot of '90s cards,
Yeah,
and I do modern. So my modern is not very much. If I send in modern cards, it may be for you know players like pirate collector. I collect pirates still, or it might be just something I opened up in a box break. I don't do that very often anymore either. But those will come back so fast, and then
yeah,
the '90s stuff will come back next. But vintage cards, I mean, it's like they're still on that 30 to 60-day minimum type thing, and it feels almost like, and then you get them back, and then sometimes the grades are just not what you expected because they're just struggling to recognize certain things. Like I complained a little bit about the fact that they're now grading cards that have tilts to them very harshly. You know, I had 2 cards that had tilts to them. That
We got
SGC grade.
a diamond cut, basically.
Yeah, diamond
Okay.
cut.
Okay.
You know, and SGC had graded them both as 7s or better, and PSA came back with grades of like 6 and below. And you know, like one of them came back at 5. I'm like, it's not a 5. It's just tilted a little bit, and it's like it's not like one of those crazy diamond cuts where the card's like at a 45-degree angle. We're talking like maybe a 2 millimeter tilt. Where, but PSA is very harsh on tilts right now, and they've gotten really tough on corners too. That you know now to get 7s and 8s, you know, what we used to call in the old days front to back damage was an automatic 7. Now it feels like that's an automatic 6. If you have damage that you can see on both the front and the back of the card, you know, used to be that was like, okay, if you have one of those, that's a 7. If you have 2 of them, that's a 6. You know, we kind of had this game in our head, and it's like, okay, well, if I got all my corners and I have one corner that has some damage, but it's not on both sides, still might get an 8. It's like
Mm.
now, like all that's out, you know, it feels like all that's off the table, and they're viewing that front to back damage as being like a 6. You know, we're losing almost a whole grade compared to what it used to be. So, like I
Wow.
said, it's you know, and you know, I'm not a big believer in grading standards changing dramatically, but they've been modified over years. I mean, when I first started grading with PSA around 97, 98, they're definitely different. And same way for SGC. You know, SGC used to be, um, they didn't have such a harsh view of off center cards. So you would find a lot of old SGC cards that are really off center still graded like a 7 or an 8, whereas PSA
Yeah.
would give those cards miscuts or OCs. So you know there was a different standard back then, and you have to kind of get used to what those standards are today versus then. When you're buying cards, you kind of have to say, "Oh, that card was graded a long time ago, so it may have a different standard." But you know, PSA has admitted that they're looking at things a little differently, and I think we're seeing it as a vintage collector. When I get cards sent into me, I'm like, "Wow, that's a little different." I
Yeah.
do appreciate that SGC is doing a lot. I feels like SGC is so consistent. Like you can almost predict their grade so much better. And I know you do a lot of predictions on your channel, and I know you do a
Mhm.
really good job at getting close on your cards. So it feels like SGC is very predictable, whereas PSA, you know, you send a card in and it's like, oh well, that was a 7 2 years ago. Now it might be a 5. I don't, you know,
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
no.
I think the one thing about SGC is like you said, they're a little bit more consistent, but as far as the slab goes, I think one thing that a lot of guys that I talk about is they don't like how big the number is.
Hmm,
And I don't know if that's something that's ever going to change. They said it's just too obnoxious.
hmm.
Do you agree? Like, did they mess up by making it that huge?
I think SGC's label's always been difficult to compare to PSA for whatever reason. PSA has gotten the font sizing right, and it feels like their label just looks right. You know, whereas SGC has changed their label. They've changed their grading standard. I mean, they used to be the 100-point
Yeah,
standard. Then
yeah.
they
You
went,
you didn't get a full number. It said like
yeah,
whatever 75 or whatever. Yeah,
yeah. You got 96 or 88 or 92, right?
right.
And they changed that. So they've changed, made a lot of changes. You know, they went to the gold label, which, you know, if I was SGC, the first thing I would do is I would totally bling out the gold label, or you know, like I would make that like reflective, refractory, print it on something crazy, you know,
Yeah.
and give it the kaboom look or whatever you want to do, say to it, but make it look really cool. Right now, like even if you see them in auctions, they don't really look that different. I think the tens should, or those, I guess they're almost like 11s, you know, perfect tens, pristines, just don't look that different. But overall, I think SGC has struggled, and they have changed their labels a lot. And
Mhm.
I don't think they've ever, you know, as far as directly on that big number, I think it doesn't help the aesthetic. It just, it makes it look like, you know, because you compare it to PSA and it just looks very, very cluttered. And like it, you know, in the slab itself, I think PSA, SGC slabs, the tuxedo look is unique. I would never change that. because that's your brand,
Yeah,
right? That's your
exactly.
whole brand right there.
Exactly.
So, if people don't like it, that's fine. You can't cater to those 10% of people out there who hate or whatever, 15% out there they don't like what the look. But you can definitely make that the label look nicer. And I feel like they should, talk to collectors more. And I think SGC is the one company that would talk to collectors about like how to make that label look nicer. And I think the first place I started again is that pristine, because to me, if you get a pristine, everyone knows that's literally one of the hardest grades to get in all of collecting.
It's like close to the Beckett 10 10
Yeah.
10 like perfect 10 because
And
people aren't using Beckett like they used to, right?
I think it's even harder than that. I think if you just did the total numbers, that's probably even harder to get than that Black Label 10 from
Right.
BGS. But to me, then it should look like something amazing. Like you open that box and it should almost be like Pulp Fiction, where it shines back at you, like something just, like it's like the Holy Grail. You opened up and there it is. There's something
That
that's
that
amazing.
that would be cool, and if they did that, then they could offer some type of send your gold 10s in, and we'll update it in the label for $5, $10, or
Yeah.
whatever kind of thing.
Well, and I think also to your point, celebration, right? I think both PSA and SGC can celebrate collectors a lot more. The one thing I thought about with PSA, because I'm getting ready to send in a bunch of rare Griffey cards that I have. They should be shouting out when they get in cool collections and something grades a 10 or something, like all the time, right? They should
Yeah.
be sitting there saying like, we just got this amazing card from this collector, and just doing that like 5 times a day, right? They could be doing that all the time on Instagram and X or whatever other services you'd want to look at. But it doesn't take a whole lot to say, because you put a little check marks on your order saying, would you be okay if we tweeted, a
Yeah.
grade, or we, put on Instagram that you're, if you received a good grade, or show off your cards, and you get consent, and it's like they're always posting people's cards, and it's just like that was something they could do all the time for virtually no money, like, and the advertising for that. But as a collector, could you imagine like how cool it would be to that PSA post the card you sent in and it got a 10 and people are commenting on it? It's like that's awesome. Like that would be a lot of fun, but they do it so rarely, and I think it just seems like they only do it to people like, oh look, like Drake's, just submitted a card, or Mike Trout just sending some of his rookie cards. Like, okay, they're Mike Trout. Mike Trout doesn't need any more followers on Instagram. Like
Yeah.
Mike Trout doesn't need to be shouted out. Like, why don't you shout out some of the collectors who've been around for
I,
forever?
I think that's a great idea, and I think that's a great point. And I was actually thinking that when you were saying it, like if they had a checkbox that says, "Are we allowed to show your card on Instagram?" and then the second check is, "Are we allowed to use your PSA name also?"
Yeah,
And like they could maybe keep it private, but they can share the card. You know what I mean? So like you make a great point there, and I just the other thing is like YouTube. Like I feel like it's untapped. SGC made a YouTube channel, and it kind of like I think it had like a couple episodes. I don't know what it's doing now. And same thing with PSA. I don't know if they have one, but if they do, I don't know about it. And it feels like I feel like you're missing out. Like if you had a professional host that did the PSA YouTube channel, and he had the number one Maze guy one week, the number one Hank Aaron guy one week, the number one Griffey guy one week. You're telling me that wouldn't be a popular channel, and it also wouldn't promote people to be like, I want to be the
yeah,
number one. You know what I mean? Like
right.
it
I
seems
mean, I
like a
think.
no-brainer.
Well, the thing that's funny is like the hobby goes around in circles. Like Beckett used to do their super collector spotlight in the magazine. And as a collector, that was coveted, right? You wanted to be the super collector in the Beckett magazine. That was
Yeah.
like the ultimate, showcase for a collector. And if and nowadays it feels like everyone has to kind of promote themselves if they want to be known as a collector. You either start a YouTube channel on your own, or you show stuff on Instagram. But like these companies are really just, again, I talk about the corporation side of it, is how I look at it. It's like they're promoting things that help promote them to make money. Promoting collectors, promoting, the registries, promoting things that don't directly make them money just seems to be like something that they're just not willing to do as much as they used to.
Mhm.
And I feel like that should change. I mean, if I was the CEO of those companies, I would say, how much money should we put in marketing to grassroots collector base, marketing, to make sure that we make sure that people feel appreciated? Because to me, in your P&L, and you look at your marketing spend on a yearly basis, that's going to be like 1/10 of what you spend for everything else. But that little bit of money, just like in most companies, when you say, how much are we spending to improve our culture? How much are we spending to make people's lives better, on the community, things like that? Like, it's never your number one spend for any company, right?
Right.
But it's like, whatever you do, people really appreciate it. And I feel like these companies, that they could just say, look, let's take 10% of our marketing budget and let's do collector-based marketing. Let's make sure we're shouting people out. And that's going to go a long ways to make people feel wanted and treated well in the community.
Yep.
And I think, if you look at what SGC does, they're doing things like that, and a lot of companies that would consider bare minimum, which is call people back, talk to them like people, like answer the questions. Like, our hobby has a long ways to go to be for having good customer service and being kind of this progressive community based, hobby where we're celebrating each other. It's almost like the bare minimum stuff is like hard to get sometimes in this hobby.
Yeah, I agree. And like you said, the bottom line is the collector is the most important cog to me, because it's the end user. And
Right.
everything going on right now with vaults. Like, I think PSA is working on a vault, I believe. Tell me if I'm speaking wrong. And in my opinion, a vault is all about resellers and flippers. I'm sorry, I'm not saying that there aren't collectors that will never use them, blah blah blah. But you're literally buying a card, never actually holding it, sending it to a vault, and then selling it to somebody from the vault. How is that? How is that for the collector? It's not for the collector. You're promoting resell. Like, why are you putting all this? Why are they putting all this money into vaulting? You know what I mean? They're trying to get that monthly payment from people, basically.
Well, the holy grail for a lot of these companies for years is to try to turn cards into stocks, and the liquidity and the ability to move those cards in as fast as the stock market can be from a liquidity perspective has been the holy grail, right? And you saw company after company after company. I mean, there was a company called the Pit back in the day that did a similar thing. You had, StockX, you have all these, trying to do the same thing, which is make cards liquid. And what the problem is that, cards aren't stocks, right? You can't treat them as the same thing. They're not even they're not even securities, right? They don't have any backing to protect people in case something goes wrong. I mean, again, my number one thing, if I hear someone use the term market cap and to talk about sports cards, then I know that that's not someone I'm probably going to agree with, because I think you should separate. There's gambling, there's investing, and there's sports card collecting. You could, the hobby itself thinks all three of them are very related, but I think most collectors collect. They don't really gamble, and they don't really view cards as being liquid assets that can be used to buy a boat or a house if they need it. It's like, you can sell your cards and buy stuff with it, but it's going to take time and effort, and it's not like you're going to do it in one day. Like if you said I'm going to turn my collection into money tomorrow, you're going to have to package it up, send it to someone else. They're going to sell it, send you the money, and in like 2 to 4 weeks, you're going to have money, and you don't know how much you're going to get, right?
Exactly.
You're going to get a pretty wide range of what you might get for your collection, and that's not liquid. That's not like what you can do on the stock market. That's not like security backed investment. So to me, that's the part I see with those people doing vaults and trying to make the hobby like a stock market. It's not the same thing. And to me, there's some similarities there, and you can talk somewhat in those terms, but it falls down pretty quickly when you actually try to use cards as investments. No one's going to take your 52 mantle as collateral on a house. That's just I mean, maybe somebody would, and if they're kind of in the future, maybe that could happen, but it's just not liquid enough for a bank to be like, well, how much money can I get for this asset? If the answer is, well, depends on how nice it's centered, depends on what year it was graded, what company. I mean, you start throwing all those factors in, and no one's going to be signing up like, yep, I'm going to give you this amount of loan based on that security. So it's just hard, And I think that's why these vaults are really out there, is to say, look, you can put all your cards in the vault and then they become really liquid and you can like move them, sell them, trade them, whatever you want to do with them. It's really fast. At the end of the day, like the collectors, like you said, want to hold their cards. They want to see them and look at them. And
Yeah.
if they're in a vault, you know, it doesn't feel like they're real. It feels like
No.
it's like an NFT. You know, to me, like the NFT market was sort of like, well, if you want a virtual card that you can buy and sell and trade without having to, you know, take ownership of it, then just do NFTs. And to me, that's sort of why that market was created. And I feel like trying to turn a real card into an NFT asset is sort of what they've been. I mean, they tried that too, right? I mean, they've tried it. They've tried everything to turn this in, to make this into like a stock market. And I just feel like it's never going to really be that way.
Yeah, because a lot of these cards, like, there's an emotional attachment when you
Mhm.
have it in your hand, and if you have a childhood memory that relates to that card, there's an emotional attachment, and they're trying to take that out of the hobby by making it, like you said, emotionless.
Right.
It's in a vault. You never get to hold it. It doesn't really. All that matters to it is how much it's worth, right? And
Right.
you know,
Well, I
if you're
call it a
watching,
widget, you know,
yeah,
like it's a widget at that point. Like, it doesn't matter what it is.
right,
And you see that. I mean, like I think you see it really heavily when something new comes out, like a Gorkana, or that a lot of people speculate on, because they don't really care what it is. Like they're just like, well, this could be hot, or I can make money on it. So it's that whole idea of like, to your point, like I collect this because it reminds me of my childhood. I can connect, you know, memories to it. I can connect emotional feelings to it. You take all that away, and really all you have is you know, an object that is bought or sold. And to me,
yeah,
that's pretty soulless. You know, and as a you know, hobbyist, I think that's just, it doesn't make it fun. I think that it also drains a little bit of the fun out of it, because then it just becomes a transactional thing. And I do
exactly,
feel like the reason why I don't like gambling in the hobby to mix too much is because to me gambling is very soulless. It's like you're there only to make money, and if you don't make money, then you don't have any fun, right?
yep,
You know, like if you open a box of cards today, you're going to lose money, but you might have a lot of fun. But
yep,
like, you know, like if you take all the fun away out from it, then it's like, well, then the only thing you cared about, did you win? You know, did you make any money? And I think you're seeing a little bit of that today. And I'm hoping the new generation of collectors don't just care about the value, and actually start pitting some thought into like, what does a good collection look like? You know, like how can I display my collection? How cool it looks? What cards look nice? You know, I like these cards because of this, versus like, what's it worth? You know, and I think that is a challenge, because I collect 90s cards, and it's so funny going back now to think about like, I didn't even, this card set I didn't even care about in the 90s. Now look how much it's worth because everyone thinks it's so cool, right? And it's like, you know, that's fun. Like that's, to me, like I don't mind the fact that I could have bought something cheaper, you know, back in the day. It's just the fact that something that I may have thought wasn't cool, a lot of people think now is cool and it's worth a lot of money. Um, and to me, that's a lot of fun, because like it or not, at some point, the cards that we're buying and selling today, that are being made today, some of them are going to be considered to be cool and worth a lot of money at some point, because
yeah,
that's just how the hobby works, right? It's just like in 30 or 40 years, there's going to be a few cards from this generation that's going to be highly sought after. And it may not be the cards that people are collecting today. It might be something that everyone thought was kind of boring and silly. And all of a sudden it's like, well, that's the card everyone wants now. Who knows? I mean, that's the fun part of collecting, is that you can't predict how humans are going to react in the future to cards.
100%. I agree. Um, this was a lot of fun. I actually had more questions, but I want to keep it at a reasonable amount of time for people to listen. I hope some people enjoyed this conversation. And Jason, I really enjoy your differing opinion. I like how long you've been, you know, around, and how long you've been in, you know, grading, starting with PSA. I think it's all really cool stuff, man. And I hope you come back on the channel again in the future.
Well, hey, thank you very much. I really appreciate having me on, and I'm really enjoying seeing you grow so fast. I mean, your channel is exploding, and you know, it's well deserved and earned, and you're definitely a good voice for this hobby.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it. And if you're not subbed to Jason's channel, it's right there, Cards and Comics. I'll have a link down below. He's doing a bunch of box breaks right now. Like you said, a lot of 90s stuff. It's really, really, really cool what he's doing. So go give him a sub, check out some of his stuff. All right. So Thank you, Jason. I'll see you around, man.
All right, man. See you next time.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you for watching. We'll see you on the next one.